Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really cool scenario. What happens when you take a single, impossible variable, a being that just shouldn't exist in that context, and you drop them into a stable, well-defined universe? It's a collision that doesn't just bend the rules, it absolutely shatters them. So, let's kick things off with that big question. When an entire civilization has built its understanding of power, of strategy, even its whole philosophy, around one set of rules, what happens when someone shows up who, simply doesn't play by them? And to figure that out, we're going to look at two totally different universes. One is defined by mystical energy, the other by ritual violence. And we're going to see how a single outsider operating on a completely different level can force both of them to face the limits of their own worldview. All right, first stop, a galaxy far, far away. Now, for thousands of years, the entire strategic and spiritual landscape was defined by one thing and one thing only: the Force. It was the ultimate power. The end. Nobody ever thought to look up and wonder if a different kind of power could come from the stars. And this is where you really see the clash, right? The Force is something you have to connect with, something you cultivate. It's a path of becoming someone powerful. But Kryptonian power, that's just biology. It's a physical constant. It's an innate state of being. One is like a religion and the other is just gravity. So you'd think his big debut would be some epic battle, right? Nope. When a massive plasma cascade threatens Coruscant, he doesn't use tactics or fancy strategies. He just applies physics. He literally absorbs the raw energy and physically molds super dense durasteel with his bare hands to seal the leak. An engineering problem solved. And just like that, with one single act, every military strategist, every Jedi Master, and every Sith Lord had to ask themselves a question they had never even considered before. All their training, all their weapons, their entire understanding of conflict was suddenly on very shaky ground. And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Every single tool of war in this galaxy, from the blasters used by trillions of soldiers to the legendary lightsabers of the Jedi, was suddenly useless. They were trying to fight a hurricane with swords. In moments, centuries of combat doctrine just became completely obsolete. And the thing is, this wasn't a slow burn. The escalation was insanely fast. He goes from being this weird oddity fixing a plumbing problem to a strategic wild card. By the time the Battle of Christophsis rolls around, he's not just an asset, he's a one-man army taking on an entire fleet all by himself. Okay, so you gotta give it to the Sith, they're smart. They adapt. Dooku comes up with this brilliant, layered trap on Mustafar. And it wasn't just about fighting him. No, it was designed to neutralize the source of his power, using a superweapon as bait, a custom-built energy shield as a cage, and a dark side beast as the weapon. Very clever. But the way he counters this, it's just on another level. Faced with a shield he can't break, he doesn't just try to punch harder. No, he completely changes the equation. He flies to the very edge of space, turns himself into a living meteor, and uses pure orbital velocity to create an impact the shield just wasn't built for. It was the ultimate victory of physics over mysticism. So he's proven he can overcome any physical threat the galaxy can dream up. But this quote here, it opens up a whole new front in this war of ideas. What happens when the greatest power isn't about your ability to kill, but your choice not to? All right, let's switch gears completely. We're leaving the world of mysticism behind and jumping into a warrior culture built on 10,000 years of ritual violence. The Yautja, a civilization where only one thing truly matters: the hunt. And you have to understand, for the Yautja, the hunt isn't just a thing they do. It's everything. It's their religion, it's their government, it's how warriors gain status. It's the absolute foundation of their society, a script that had been followed for millennia. So naturally, when our outsider shows up, what do? They challenge him to a hunt. 3 of their most elite warriors. The whole thing is over in less than a minute. Their molecular edge discs, their blades, all of their most sacred weapons just screech and fail against his skin before he takes them all down with precise, non-lethal strikes. And then, just as they're reeling from this complete invalidation of their warrior code, a new threat shows up. A massive fleet of exiled Yautja, the Bad Bloods, who've thrown out the honor code. And this puts our outsider in the bizarre position of having to defend the very hunters who just tried to kill him. And we're not talking about a small raiding party here. We are talking about an entire armada. 20 warships, led by a ruthless outcast, show up in orbit, ready to completely obliterate the Yautja homeworld. So what does he do? He goes up to meet them, alone. And what happened next wasn't a fight. The Yautja on the ground, they called it a lesson that lasted only 8 minutes and resulted in 0 casualties. That's the number that changed everything. He just systematically took apart the entire fleet, crushing weapons, disabling engines, stopping ships with his bare hands, all with absolute surgical precision. And that act of ultimate restraint, this display of absolute power used with perfect control, that was more devastating to the Yautja way of life than 1,000 killing blows ever could have been. It introduced a new, unthinkable idea into their culture. You know, the clan leader Guan Thur is watching all this from the ground, and he just puts it perfectly. For 10,000 years, they thought the ultimate expression of power was taking a life. And now they were witnessing a power so profound, it didn't need to. So after the non-battle, the real fight begins, and it's a battle of ideas. In a council of elders, he looks them in the eye and challenges their most secret traditions, arguing their brutal training methods weren't just cruel, they were inefficient. And because he had the power to back up his words, they were forced to listen. This new accord wasn't just some treaty. It was a crack in the very foundation of their civilization, planting the seeds of a cultural civil war between the old guard and a new generation of evolutionaries. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a universe run by the Force or an empire built on the hunt. The result was the same. His mere existence in both of those places proved that their entire definition of power was just fundamentally incomplete. It was too small. And that leaves us with this one last thought, right? The greatest threat to any established system, whether it's technological, philosophical, or military, isn't a bigger gun or a stronger army. It's a new variable that comes along and introduces a completely different idea of what power can even be.